Okay, last time we talked about why people join cults, especially doomsday cults, which is kind of very radical. Last time we touched on Children of God, which was basically a highly sexualized cult that paraded itself as, of course, a humanitarian organization that was trying to promote social justice, which is what, they always have a guise of they're trying to make the world a better place. They usually always recruit people who are more like the bleeding heart type liberals. Usually these groups wait kind of in the shadows, gaining quiet momentum, and then once a event in the social landscape that's pretty life-changing happens, like destabilizes everybody's basic, day-to-day living and puts them in sort of a blender of turmoil, if you will. That's when these groups come out of the woodwork and heavily recruit, and they make a lot of progress quickly. For example, last time I talked about the Vietnam War and how there were draft dodgers. There was, the assassinations of JFK, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, like all the big figures that everybody sort of looked up to for authority and law and order were being murdered. So, and then the war was failing. However, more and more young men were being drafted, and they had to make the decision to go to basically a losing war where it had pretty much been exposed with the fallout with Nixon that it was not for the reasons that they said. It was for what a lot of times it's about profit and power and manipulating other countries to under American, like whatever America's pursuits are at that time, which many times natural resources or domination. This was under the guise of communism and shutting that down because of the Cold War. However, by the time Children of God really got going, a lot of those illusions had been exposed. And so it was a heavy hitting recruitment time for them because they knew there were all these young people who were not going to go do that, because they thought it was for nefarious reasons, right? So where are they going to go? They're rebelling against the democratic system. So it's like this perfect time to pull them into this cult and tell them that they're now going to have a cause to devote themselves to that's worthwhile and that's going to change their lives, and they're going to travel to all these exciting places and free love and drugs and whatever. That was great breeding ground for that group. And that's happened over and over again in times in history where it's these groups that are kind of, they're radical, but not in an organized political way. It's they're radical in that, well, they're not radical. They're more subversive. They're trying to they're double-minded. They're trying to do one thing and then pose as something else, right? So it's like, actually, the cult leaders are driven by sex, power, and money, right? And they're usually malignant narcissists who believe they're the prophet of God. They believe that, like, they're, this, they're being spoken to by God and told that they're, carrying out direct orders from above, right? And so it sets up this sort of authoritarian structure where it's basically like, you don't ask questions. They do this weird thing where it's like, they do this sort of soft recruiting where it's like, kind of like when you, like the boil a frog theory, where it's like, you get them to go, in like the water, then it's warm, then it's boiling, and then they're dying, and that kind of thing, where it's like a slow drip of losing your freedom, losing your autonomy, losing your finances, losing your sexual, what do I want to say? Your ability to direct your own sexuality, right? Because at some point you're going to get mind controlled by these people, and they're going to make you feel guilty if you don't do exactly what they want, the way they want it. And it's going to be more like a submission to somebody who is an authority figure above you and is just sort of barking out, the orders of how this is going to run, and you don't have any say-so in it. And then it gets really slippery, because it's like, a lot of times they use the group's sexuality, especially the women or older children, to get high roller type. I mean, high roller is like a casino term, but you know what I mean? Like, they try to get them to bring in people, men who have money, and will fund. Basically, it's like, it's a whole double-minded thing all over again. It's a double standard. It's like double-minded, because and it's like transactional. Basically, it's like, you give us large contributions of money that we can count on. We're going to put them in these funds that we are going to say are for things they're not for, right? Charity, good works, right? Helping the community. But it's really going to just go and line the leaders' pockets so that they can, keep their complete tight-fisted control over the group and do crazy things like Jim Jones. Like, he had how was that? A compound in Jonestown, 4,000. What was it? Oh, I'm not gonna look for my notes, but he bought this huge commune space in another country and made everybody move, like the entire group of like 1,000 people of his followers moved from San Francisco to this South American country. And then, of course, everybody knows he had them all drink the poison Kool-Aid, including having it squirted in babies' mouths, and it was like a mass suicide. And I think it's 993 people died. But it's like, he had to buy that whole compound and the whole space where they all were living, and then pay off the local police. I mean, it was a huge financial endeavor, which he could have never done on his own with money. like in a money that was made legitimately. He needed those big donors to be able to, find all these plane tickets. This is the whole thing had to be a mass operation. It's like they'll do stuff like that. They'll divide the groups that they have dominion over. They'll isolate them. They don't have any outside contact. Of course, they've all cut off their families. They've all cut off, their prior work situation, all of that. They don't own their own cars. They don't own their own property. They're completely submitted to the group. So it's up to him to then provide their housing, everything's set up in a way that it's it looks like you're being provided by your benevolent, your great leader, right? You're being provided for just like God would provide for his children, right? You don't have to worry about it. It's all taken care of. But it's taken care of with dirty money that you raise basically by prostituting your wives and children out. I mean, the whole thing's just a sick nightmare. But the reason these big hitters are, from all different walks of law or doctors or lawyers, people in the community who have high status, the reason why they're doing these big donations, very Epstein-like, they're doing it because the payoff is they're getting sexual favors, probably with people that you would normally have access to. I'm not going to get into all the... It's forbidden, some of the interactions these people have. So there's a high level of don't ask, don't tell. They don't obviously want their sexual double life or whatever they're doing personally to be outed. So there's a lot of hush hush. So then, it's not blackmail, but it's their whole reputation and what they're doing is, it's not good legally. And morally, of course, it's reprehensible. But of course it's all done under the guise of these, not always Christian, a lot of times they're Eastern religion, sects or SECTS. And the ultimate goal for everybody is said to be David Berg, with Children of God. He was trying to and Jim Jones, he adopted all these children from all different ethnicities and races. He wanted, and he really got into the black church. He was really into the Pentecostal church. He was deep into the roots of the community and the religious imprint of that community. And he would invest himself heavily into that and then turn around and sort of flip that as a means of control, to control his delegated, people who were doing... There's always layers in a cult. There's layers of... It's a top-down, who knows what. That they really... It's a very tightly held, coercive control. There's usually... in these cases, a lot of times hallucinogenic drugs were used. A lot of gaslighting, basically dooming people verbally by saying, you don't have anything to go back to anyway, you haven't had a resume in 10 years, who's gonna hire you? You have your family's not gonna accept you back. because you've been doing all these weird things with us. You know, it's like they have this whole thing where they make it seem like you're trapped. Even if you want to leave and you decide, you or a few others are like, we don't think the reason that we thought we were here is what's going on. It's like they make it seem like you're going to be shamed. It's a lot of shaming. It's a lot of groupthink. It's a lot of, you know, a lot of times cults have special languages. They use a special vocabulary nobody really knows outside of the group. Like I said, they don't have contact, like River Phoenix and his family. I think they had a family of 5. Maybe it was 6. Constantly moving South America and Puerto Rico, California. They were constantly, always relocated. And this is definitely a thing that cults do, is they have an overall control. Like the people who are the higher ups, they don't do the moving. They move the smaller people around like pawns and then if there's anybody who is a whistleblower, somebody who's gonna influence others that what's really going on, that person will usually be isolated, sent somewhere else far away from everybody so they don't further that sentiment. There's a show I was super into called The Leftovers. It's based on a book by Tom Peretta. He did Little Children, which was the movie with like Kate Winslet. I want to say Jude Law was in that. But anyway, this particular book made into like a, I don't know if it's HBO, a series, Showtime, one of those. The whole premise was there was a sudden supernatural event, and all of a sudden across the whole world, mass amounts of people just disappeared. They just vanished. Like they were just like Star Trek, you know, like where they like their bodies fade into this like silhouette light and then suddenly they're nothing, you know, and then they're transported somewhere else. It was like that, only the people got transported up to heaven or down to hell or whatever. But it's like all these, and so the leftovers, the reason they call it the leftovers, because everybody who didn't get taken was who's left over. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because one of the things they do in that series that they do so well is they have a cult comes to be made by the people who are, they've kind of lost, you know, they lost key family members or key people in their lives were, you know, the ones who vanished. And so they all form this weird society where they all wear white. They chain smoke, which is the weirdest part. They don't talk. They only write like notes. They don't verbally talk anymore. And then they all live together and they have, you know, all this. It's a very close society. But then they go around the different communities. So weird. And then they basically stalk people who maybe don't believe in whatever oddball theory they have, whether it's they think aliens took everybody or, you know, they have some kooky theory about, and they all think that it's going to happen again. Like there's, you know, like a doomsday thing. Like they're trying to pressure the people who don't believe that it's going to happen again, that yes, it is going to happen again. And the reason I bring this up is because it's kind of like an excellent representation of how people literally leave everything behind, and they're supposedly brainwashed, but it's more than brainwashing. It's actually more like somebody in a domestic violence or narcissistic type relationship where somebody takes complete control over them and they're submitted to that person, and they basically give up their free will and thinking, and then that person confuses the heck out of them and makes them think that, they're less than and they don't have any value, and that they have to have them basically making all their decisions for them. Like, it's the same kind of coercive control tactics you would have in like a dysfunctional domestic relationship, only on a broad scale of massive amounts of people. But it's like everybody in that cult, I can't remember the name of it. I can't believe I can't remember the name of it. But all those people there, they leave. I mean, the family members they do have, or work partner, or any relationships they have, or societal connections, they literally give them all up. And they don't want to have anything to do with them anymore, even if it's their own children. Like, they literally become cold, distant, unemotional. They're not responding to anything, which is very much like how cults do that. Like, by the time the person is indoctrinated in them, it's like they're told their former life is dead. Like, their former self is they've given that up for their divine mission, and it's like that's a threat to who they are now for the community that that they believe in. And so they're extremely resistant. It's like you can't talk to them, you can't verbally convince them that they're being controlled, because it's happened slowly over a period of time. It's like usually these recruitments are oftentimes based on education, where it's like, I was just studying one cult where they were offering classes on quitting smoking. This was like in the 70s. And it was just like, you just pay like $250 for this however many weeks workshop. And then as you're doing that, then they start introducing you to this group, and you go to the meetings, and the next thing you know, you've been promoted to like some kind of responsibility. And then and then you're sort of pressured to quit your job and work for them instead. Well, you're not really working for a salary because it's a charity organization, right? So oftentimes it's room and board. So then you give up your apartment or your pets, or, it's a slow stepping process. Once they step down, it's like you're just sort of moving through each stage from autonomy, just like the American way, right? Individualism, to groupthink. And once you're over here, it gets very like Scientology, like where you've already been broken down psychologically and mentally. Then they add the sexual stuff, or they add, the crazy like moving you around and like you don't know what you're doing, and then you work like all these people work so hard for these groups, like like 14-hour days or crazy hours, and it's like a lot of times their work is basically brainwashing, and I hate using the word brainwashing, but basically mind controlling people who've just joined. So it's like you go to a 12-step meeting to like maybe quit drinking, and then next thing you know you've signed up for a committee, and the next thing you know you're doing like some big event, and then it's just like a gradual thing, and now you're treasurer, and now not to say anything negative, 12-step group, it's just an example, but it's like it doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow process over time. However, it always moves in that direction from leaving individuality to complete absorption by the group, and to a point where you stop questioning what they're doing. They don't want they're not interested in free thinking. They're not interested in you having opinions about what you're doing, about your work. It's just like, if you want to be socially accepted, they really take advantage of the human desire for socialization. Like in the past, like with cavemen or like, pioneers and stuff, it's like if they weren't part of a group, your chance of dying or being eaten by an animal was much higher, the elements, all these things. But if you were with a group of people and you're all working together, the common goal of like survival, your chances increased heavily. It's like they would take advantage of that natural compulsion and then use that with negative programming and selfishly constructed a system that drains you sexually, financially, emotionally, psychologically, including like sleep deprivation, everything. Like you can't even like have property. It's all done for the means to the end, which the end is control over you. Like you won't leave, and they make sure that if you think you could leave, that you're aware that your life, the quality of your life is going to suck because people are going to be mad at you for having cut them off years ago, and you're not going to be accepted back. It's going to be so hard for you to blend in with people who, aren't on the same wavelength as you are. And especially when you've been to all these foreign countries, and it's like the only people you're ever around are other people who are completely down for the cause. So it's like, how then would you just go back to the rat race or just being around just regular neighbor? I mean, like, it would be so hard. Like, even just going to the grocery shopping at a local grocery store would be overwhelming. Because it's kind of like when people leave prison and they've been in prison system since maybe they were juvies, and it's all they've known. It's like, even though they're finally free and they're finally can do what they want, it's like a lot of times they lose it and they actually miss being confined, crazily enough, because it had structure. They never had to think. They never had to do anything on their own. And they find that when they do try to do things on their own, they don't really understand the processes in place. They feel uncomfortable. They don't feel like they belong anywhere. So it's like this whole thing. And Shawshank Redemption had a whole thing about that, because I think Morgan Freeman played this guy Red. And like when he finally gets released from prison, it's like, he's been in the prison system since he was like a late teenager, and it's like he almost hangs himself because he's so lost. Like technology, and like there's cars and noise and pollution, and like he didn't know any of these things, and it's like he feels displaced, uncomfortable, lonely, like different, weird, and it's like he actually craves being back in somewhere where it was all, he didn't have to think for himself, and it was all a set environment that he understood, that he didn't have to navigate without any skill set, right? I mean, they have skills in the prison, of course they have jobs, but it's like it's a community group thing usually. And so there's another theory, it's called the sunken, what is it called? The sunk cost fallacy. And what that basically is okay, let's say you're in a bad relationship or you hate your job, right? Or both. And but you've been in these things for, like, let's say 15, 20 years, right? Now you're realizing it's not progressing. It didn't turn out the way you thought. It actually was the wrong choice for you. And so it's scary because to admit you made the wrong choice, it means you lost like 15 years of your life. Or you know what I mean? Like you have to face the facts that you were living not the way you wanted for a long period of time. So it's like people can't face that. It's too upsetting. Like the best years of my life, blah, blah, blah. So, especially with jobs where it's like they think they're going to get some promotion or some higher salary or a higher level at some point, and then it never happens. And then they're just like, so I put in all this time, like, just to be in the same place at the same low rate. Like, I have nothing to show for myself. And now 15 years ago, it's like, it's so upsetting to your psyche to accept that you fucked up, right? And you have to now live with those consequences. That it's like you convince yourself otherwise. Like you convince yourself, well, there's nothing better for me out there anyway. Now I'm older, no one's gonna hire me somewhere else anyway. Or you think, you lie to yourself and say, well, actually I really like it here, this is fine. Like I made the right choice. I'm over exaggerating. And you do that because you can't accept what you can't accept, your ego can't accept that you chose the wrong door or whatever. It's like you'd rather just get along with it, go along to get along, right? So the alternatives are scary and expensive. Like if you have to get a divorce, or you have to like deal with like custody or property, or or if with a job, it's like if you have to move away somewhere else and you don't even know how to change your housing, or you don't even have the money for any of that. It's like all those things are so frightening and scary and like out of your range of daily thinking that it makes you feel better just to convince yourself that you actually are fine where you are, and no, those aren't your real thoughts, and you were just exaggerating, or you were just having a bad day, and like it's all like you like it, it's fine, you're staying. It was worth it. The main thing is it's worth it. It was, everything I did was worth it. I know what I'm doing. I'm in charge of my own life. I know what I'm doing. Like, no one can tell me what I know, right, about my own life. But it's like, that's what people do about cults. They'll be like, they'll freak themselves out and be like, well, if I tried to start over, all these bad things would happen to me. And then I would actually have to face the fact that I gave all my life, my time, probably had sex with other people I don't even wanted to. And, whatever came of that, like, you'd have to face all these things, like, I probably pimped out, like, my own spouse, like, you can't recruit, like, all this stuff you can't mentally handle. So it's like, it's easier to just be like, yeah, I made this choice, and this is what I'm doing, and, like, I believe in this group, and I'm not a sucker. I'm not a sucker. I would not ruin my own life. Like, I wouldn't give up my money and, like, my children's, like being abused and stuff. Like, I wouldn't let my own children be abused or molested by strangers. Like, I'm not like that. That's not the kind of parent I am. That's not who I am. So it's like you can't face the facts. So it's like you have to sell it to yourself, like a hard sell or whatever, that you're not being taken advantage of. Like, You actually like it. It's actually fine. So these are that's kind of like, there's these programs, and there's some amazing like psychology experts. Some of them are like, have their own schools, or, I mean, they're not schools. They're more like deprogramming programs that you have to go through to, after you leave the cult, and they sort of teach you, they deprogram you basically of everything that so that you can handle the transition to regular society. What I was trying to say before is like, all these groups, they often also have these strange, arbitrary, big deal, catastrophic events. So they'll also keep people, like, some of them will be like, oh, on such and such a day in like 12 years from now, it's going to be the end of the world. They convince the children, like from a young age, they're told every day that, the world could end at any moment if they're not, doing what they're supposed to be doing for the group. It's gonna, maybe it'll happen sooner, and there's just all this pressure, constant pressure, and a lot of it's made up, just to get them to do whatever. But then the weird thing is like, a lot of these leaders are completely mentally ill, or they have personality disorder, they're far gone on their power trips. So it's like, they need to believe it too, because they couldn't do these insane things that they do. I mean, it's basically like, it reminds me of the Stanford prison experiment, which was something that happened, obviously, at Stanford. I want to say it was 30 days. Maybe it was not 30 days. It was this period of time. Maybe it was 10 days. I don't remember. But it's like, they decided, the professors there decided to have an experiment where they would have volunteer students become prison guards, and then the other ones would be the prisoners, and then they would just have them all locked up in a part of the university that they would make into like a jail, right? And the guards went off on like, and they were just regular people. They just started, like humiliating the prisoners and beating them and just doing all kinds of insane things that in their normal life they would never do. And it was like, the whole thing was like it was like people just lost it with power. Like it was like they took their role playing and they just got all their aggression, all their hatred, like everything negative that they had in them, they just turned on the people who were not prisoners. They were just students, just like them. They didn't have a higher standing in any way. And so it's like in some way, and they had to shut down the whole experiment because it just went off the rails, which is just fascinating. It's like one of the big studies people use. There's another one, I want to say let's say the right word, Milton something experiment. I'm not saying it right. Something with an M. Where, named after the guy who did it, where they had a bunch of people come in. These were like volunteer control groups, and they would have a device that would give an electric shock to whoever was set up as the experiment person, the person being experimented on, and then the average people would gradually be told to give them more and more shocks, like to punish them more for these whatever things they supposedly did, which they didn't do. And they wanted to see, the whole point of the experiment was to see, would people actually physically hurt other people, like seriously physically hurt them, just because they were told to? Not because there was any like real rules or protocol, or, you know, they weren't actually in a real scenario where they were supposed to be torturing anybody. But time and time again, when they did it, these people didn't say anything. Well, they, obviously the subject was like crying out in pain and suffering, and they just did what they were told. So it's like an authority thing. Like, they basically proved that people just follow the crowd. And like you know how like in cities, if someone gets attacked on a subway, like a lot of times people, you know, have that city psychological reaction where it's like, don't look at anybody, don't get involved, you know, you'll just get hurt yourself. And it's like people will not try to help a bystander or somebody who's obviously innocent and suffering in front of them, because they are afraid of being targeted themselves, or being disliked by the group, or being considered different or not compliant or whatever. But it's like there's these different scenarios, and it's the same thing with like a psychologically abusive relationship, right? Or like these cults where it's like people will do like things. I mean, they proved all of this, like even during like the Nazi when they did experiments on people. It's like a lot of groups will just, sorry, I'm like having a technology problem. What was I saying? They'll just follow the leader. They won't ask questions. They won't try to protect others. They won't go against the grain. They'll just do what they're told without making a fuss. And that's the kind of human behavior that cults will, or like con artists, or anybody trying to take advantage of financial, people are taking advantage financially, you know, are targeted in that way, especially like the elderly. They'll take advantage of this human nature where we are willing to go a little bit out of our way for others, but there's definitely like a fear of being made fool of, or maybe getting targeted ourselves if we go too far, you know. So cults just, they use all that to their advantage. Okay, I'm going to end it here. I'm at time. And maybe next time I'll get into some more of the religious cults and the particular fanaticism around those. All right.